Updated January 10, 2019, 10 hours 5 minutes and 11 seconds. The life of a rugby hero whose influence on the sport has been likened to Don Bradman has been celebrated at a funeral in a tiny New South Wales South Coast town. Former Wallabies captain John Thornett died in Batemans Bay last week, aged 83, after a long battle with illness. Sydney club members and country-based former Wallabies flocked to Burleigh to pay their respects to a man lauded as Australia's greatest rugby captain. Thornett led Australia for the first time in 1962 against New Zealand in Wellington, and again in 1964 when it inflicted a then-record defeat of New Zealand 20-5 at Wellington. The 15-point margin remains the largest All Black Test match defeat at home in history. Thornett also led the Wallabies to their first major Test series win in 16 years as they defeated South Africa at home in 1965. Former Wallaby and ABC commentator Gary Pearce said Wednesday's service highlighted Thornett's professional achievements while celebrating his personal qualities and love of family and country life. "It was great today to see his caring, big heart is living well within his family," Mr. Pearce said. "He wasn't a limelight player, but he was the gritty bloke who always supported his teammate to the end, and the way he did it, he inspired others to do the same. That type of discipline on the field just naturally came off the field and as a person, and he was one of the nicest blokes you'd ever want to meet," he said. The eldest of three brothers, who each carved out decorated international sporting careers, Thornett played 37 tests and toured 8 times with the Wallabies, captaining the side on 4 of those tours. Thornett became the second Wallaby to play 100 matches for the side, was inducted into the Sport Australia Hall of Fame in 1985 and was one of 11 players inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame. Rugby Australia Chief Executive, Raelene Castle said, "Australian rugby has not only lost one of its greatest Wallabies, but one of its finest leaders. John Thornett played rugby for the love of the game and at all times treasured its values of mateship and sportsmanship. There was nothing he would not do for the game and his team, which is why his name is synonymous with Australian pride and great leadership," Ms. Castle said. Thornett played in 4 different positions during his 13-year international career, representing the Wallabies as flanker, lock, and both tight head and loose head prop. Following his retirement, Thornett wrote a book titled This World of Rugby and was appointed to the first national coaching panel, which devised a coaching manual and system that underpinned Australian success for decades to come. He also served as Vice President of New South Wales Rugby Union. Wallabies captain Michael Hooper said Thornett remained an example for players today. "When I sit down and chat with former Wallabies about their time in the gold jersey, they all speak glowingly of John and are in awe of how he played on the field and how he represented himself in Australia," Hooper said. Pearce said Thornett distilled the talent and confidence of the era and spirit of the amateur in the 1950s and 60s. "They went away on extensive tours overseas to represent Australia, but they had to come back and make ends meet," he said. "Their attitude representing Australia was extraordinary, committed, and that was right down to the bone with their sportsmanship and their will to win." The Sydney-based engineer moved onto the land to farm in Cowra before eventually settling on the far south coast. Pearce said the rugby legend loved country people and country life. "To live in this part of the world was very special to him," he said. Former Wallaby and one-time Australian Rugby Union President Peter Criddle agreed Thornett was the most outstanding leader in Australian rugby. "He led by example and was a great advertisement for Australia off the field as well," Criddle said when he was interviewed for "Sometimes the Best Ever," the story of the 1966 Seventh Wallabies, which marked the 50th anniversary of the Grand Tour of the Northern Hemisphere, which was captained by Thornett. Other former team members said he captured the imagination of the British sporting public, and described Thornett as the world's finest gentleman, and a man with unbelievable character who you'd give your heart and soul for. Thornett retired from international rugby following The 1966-67 tour of the British Isles and France, his 8th tour with the Wallabies, but continued to play for Northern Suburbs in the Sydney grade competition where he amassed 126 matches and led the club to 5 grand finals. Editor's note: the 19th of January 16. This article has been amended to correct errors that were provided to the ABC. Topics: Death, Rugby Union, History, Batemans Bay 2536, Bega 2550, Cowra 2794. First posted January 10, 2019. 7 hours 46 minutes and 48 seconds.